A lot of the songs are in the Bible, in the book of Psalms. Some of the songs are about God, and all of the songs that David sang, he sang to worship and to soothe and calm Saul down. Now, some other things happened in David's life. When he was a young boy, as you may know, there was a great war in all the land, a great war in the land of Israel. The Philistines wanted all of that land, that whole place, for themselves. And so they were fighting back and forth. The army of the people of God were living in a place, and the Philistines, their army, were coming to that place to try to fight them for it, to try to take the land away from them. I bet you know this story. Armies were lining up. Israel, the people of God, and the Philistines who wanted to take their land. As they lined up, there was something important that happened. They began to get scared because the Philistines had a big soldier, a tall man, like a giant, like the biggest man you can imagine, strongest, most terrifying soldier. He came out to challenge Saul's army, the army of God. I bet you know his name, Goliath. No one wanted to fight Goliath. But when David heard the challenge, he went forward to fight Goliath. David and Goliath were going to fight. They tried to get David ready. They said, let's put on some special armor. Let's put on something to protect you, like a shield or like some special clothes, some armor. But it was too heavy because David was still just a little boy. So the armor was just too heavy on him. So David cast it aside, and instead he went against Goliath. Remember? The big giant, the tallest, largest, strongest soldier you can imagine. David went against him with only a few things. The shepherd's staff that he always used to take care of the sheep, a slingshot that he used, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 simple stones. Slingshot, 5 stones, and his shepherd's staff, the one he used to take care of the sheep. He had to kill things before. He had to kill lions. He had to kill bears. He had to kill other wild animals in order to protect the sheep. But he'd never been a soldier, and he'd never fought in a battle. Surely he could fight Goliath, though, if he fought a bear, if he fought a lion. To protect the sheep, perhaps he could fight Goliath to protect his people. Later you can tell us more about the battle against Goliath. I bet you know the story. We can read about it later. Because little tiny David and big strong Goliath battled. David won. David won against this huge, strong, terrifying soldier. David was the winner. Pardon me for just a moment. I need 2 people. Okay, I just noticed these were missing. All right. Now, King Saul, who was still the king, had many, many sons. One of them was named Jonathan. And Jonathan and David became really good friends, like best friends. Jonathan always stood up for David and tried to protect him from harm, even harm from his father, the king. Because sometimes Saul got angry at David, and Jonathan would defend David against his own father, against King Saul. David had become a really great soldier. Remember what happened? He beat Goliath. And Saul had started to get really jealous of David. Saul had begun to get jealous of the soldier David, of the hero who defeated Goliath of the Philistines. He started to get really worried that David was going to be more popular than himself. Jonathan's father, Saul, was jealous of David. We've talked about jealousy a lot in the Old Testament. Not only was he a great soldier, like I said, but David had become more and more popular. One day, Saul decided he wanted to get rid of David. He wanted to have David gone so that he didn't have to be jealous anymore. But Jonathan spoke to his father about David and told him, "Dad, David is a good man. He's my friend." But Saul would not listen. Remember, he had that mad, sad, frustrated, terrible feeling in his heart and in his mind. Saul wasn't well. So even when Jonathan said, "Dad, don't be jealous of David. He's a good man," it didn't make any difference. Saul was still really mad. So Jonathan began to realize that the only way for David to be safe would be for him to run away. Jonathan knew that his father was going to try to get rid of him, was going to try to hurt him. So he told David, "You need to run away and hide." So this meant they had to say goodbye. They couldn't be together as friends anymore because David needed to run away. He needed to go someplace else so that Saul couldn't hurt him. Well, as time went on, King Saul and his sons led their army against the Philistines once more. But this time, Saul and his sons were killed in battle. They died during the war, during the battle. David was moving through the land with his army, his part of the soldiers, and someone came to tell him the news that King Saul and his sons were dead. He was so sad. David never forgot about his good friend Jonathan, and he was so sad to hear that he would never see him again. Later, when David was king, he brought Jonathan's own son to live with him, eat at his table, and he gave him the land that had belonged to Jonathan's father, Saul. So one day, David knew Jonathan's son, but after this battle, he never knew Jonathan anymore. But now it was time for David to be king. Now it was a time for David to take over and rule all of Israel. The young man brought to David the king's crown. The person who told David that Saul had died also got him ready to be king. Now all of the tribes of Israel, remember, the children of children of children of children's, the whole family of Jacob, Israel, all the descendants of Jacob's sons, came to Hebron to make David the new king. And they said, "You will shepherd over all the people. You will shepherd your people Israel." At this time, David was only 30 years old. He was still quite young, but he would be the king for 40 more years. He was 30, he'd be king for 40 more. So all told, he would be the king until he was 70 years old. One of the first things that David did as soon as he became king was he quickly went to the city of Jerusalem to take it back from the Jebusite people. He wanted Jerusalem to be God's city again. So now there was a city of David in Bethlehem, and there was a city of David in Jerusalem. 2 cities for the tribes of Israel, for King David's. Do you know what this is? You've seen it before. After King David had brought these 2 cities into ownership for the people of Israel, he suddenly remembered about the Ark of the Covenant, the special box that held the 10 Commandments. He remembered that the Philistines had taken it during a battle. Do you remember the story of Eli and Samuel and the Ark of the Covenant? Do you remember the battle? They lost the Ark of the Covenant. And David remembered that, and he wanted God's people to have it back. He thought it belonged to God's people. We need it again. We need to have it to take care of it. So he decided he would find a way to get it back. They had to go and get the ark and bring it back to Jerusalem. It was a hard battle, but they brought it home. And King David just danced in front of the ark. He was so excited as it was carried to its place in the tent, like it had been in the desert so many years before. They built a tent over it to protect it. And as they brought it home, David thought, I want to build a house for God. I want to make more than a tent. I want to build a house, a temple, a more beautiful place for the ark, a more special place for the ark. But God said, no, that's not going to be your job. David, you are the king of war, battling against the Philistines, battling against the Jebusites. You are the king of war, but your son Solomon, he will build a temple. King Solomon will be the one who builds that temple. Well, in the spring of that year, in the time that most kings go into battle, during that time, David sent his army away, but he remained back in Jerusalem. We're running out of space on here. Let's move things down. David remained back in Jerusalem while his army went off to war. Here's Jerusalem. As his army went off to war, David was home, and one afternoon he saw a woman named Bathsheba. She was a beautiful woman, and she was a wife of a man named Uriah. She was married, but David saw her. And even though she was married, he thought, I want to be married to her instead. I don't want her to be married to Uriah. I want her to be married to me.